Every country believes it's strong. Every family believes they're safe. But collapse never announces itself with fire or noise. It doesn't break the door down or arrive like a storm. It slips into ordinary days, into quiet mornings, into the small routines we no longer pay attention to. Imagine a city at dawn, people moving through the streets with the same calm rhythm as always, coffee in one hand, phone in the other, their minds already on the day ahead. Nothing looks wrong. Nothing feels wrong. But beneath that pastel sky, something is changing. Step inside a modest apartment. Morning light spills through the window, soft and warm, painting everything in the gentle colors of routine. The kitchen counter, the table, the untouched cup of coffee. It all looks peaceful, familiar, safe, until your eyes land on the small details. The electricity bill left open on the table, the grocery receipt growing longer each week, the quiet sigh of someone who doesn't quite know why life feels heavier than it used to. Collapse begins here, not with riots, not with breaking news, but with the middle class slowly fading, long before anyone sees it happening. Today, I want to show you something most people never notice: the silent signs that a country is beginning to fall. Not in its parliaments or stock exchanges, but in its kitchens, its markets, its living rooms. Because the greatest crises in history never start in the economy. They start inside people's homes. If you really want to know when a country begins to fall, don't look at its politicians. Don't look at its stock exchange. Look at its grocery stores. Because the first cracks in a nation never appear in grand speeches or financial charts. They show up quietly in the places where ordinary people live their ordinary lives. Walk into a supermarket. Nothing dramatic. Just the soft hum of refrigerators, the quiet shuffle of carts, the same shelves you've seen 1,000 times before. But something's different. Not loud enough to panic you, just enough to make you pause. A carton of eggs that used to be cheap now costs as much as a small luxury. A loaf of bread feels strangely expensive. Your favorite cereal shrinks in size, but not in price. The items in your basket stay the same. Yet somehow the total at the register climbs higher each week. You tell yourself it's temporary, a phase. It'll pass. But it doesn't. You start buying less without meaning to. You hesitate before picking up basic items. And one day, without even noticing when it started, you walk out of the store carrying fewer bags than you used to. This is how collapse begins in real life. Not with violence, not with headlines, but with millions of small decisions made in silence. A mother puts back a pack of fruit. A father buys a cheaper brand of milk. A young couple stands quietly in front of a shelf, doing math in their heads. None of them think they're witnessing the decline of a country. They just think they're having a bad week. But these small moments, these tiny hesitations, are the first whispers of something much bigger. But the decline doesn't stop at the supermarket. Slowly it begins to seep into people's minds, not as fear, not as panic, but as a quiet exhaustion that settles into the corners of everyday life. You start cutting small things first. The morning coffee you used to grab without thinking. The brand name products you once preferred. Weekend plans that once felt normal now feel unnecessary. You don't call it economic pressure. You call it saving a little. But day by day, something inside you changes. You stop opening the mail as soon as it arrives. You wait a little longer to pay certain bills. You check your bank account twice instead of once. And before you go to sleep, your mind drifts into calculations you never used to make. This is the psychological side of collapse, the part no one talks about because it doesn't happen all at once. It happens in tiny moments that quietly reshape your sense of stability. A family postpones replacing a broken appliance. A young man ignores a strange sound in his car engine. Parents hesitate before agreeing to a school trip fee. A couple lets their savings sit untouched, too afraid to make a mistake. None of these decisions look dramatic on their own. But when millions of people make them at the same time, the entire mood of a nation shifts. The country doesn't collapse when banks fail. The collapse begins long before that. When ordinary people stop believing tomorrow will be easier than today, that's the moment a nation starts to fall, and almost no one ever sees it happen. When you look back through history, you start to notice something unsettling. Nations rarely collapse with a single event. They dissolve slowly, like a rope fraying thread by thread until one day it simply snaps. Take Argentina in the early 2000s. Before the crisis made headlines, the warning signs were already inside people's homes. Families skipping meat for cheaper meals, parents delaying school purchases, salaries that looked the same on paper but bought less every month. It wasn't the banks that fell first. It was confidence. The same pattern appeared in Greece years later, long before unemployment hit 25%, before pensions were slashed, before protests filled the streets. There were quieter moments, a shopkeeper turning off half the lights to save electricity, a father taking the bus instead of driving, a grandmother counting coins before buying fruit. These moments rarely appear in documentaries, but they are the true beginning of collapse. Even great empires fell this way. Rome didn't fall because of one battle. People simply began to feel poorer. Grain prices rose, wages shrank, and ordinary citizens felt their lives tightening long before the empire visibly weakened. Every nation believes it is too modern, too advanced, too powerful to follow the same path. But history whispers the same truth again and again. Collapse is always quiet at first, always domestic, always personal. It begins not with governments losing control, but with people losing certainty. And by the time the world notices, the damage is already done. A country doesn't fall because one thing goes wrong. It falls because dozens of small pressures begin to work together. Each one subtle, each one quiet, each one stealing a little more strength from the people who hold the nation up. Here is how the collapse deepens. When families buy less, stores earn less. When stores earn less, they order less from suppliers. When suppliers receive fewer orders, factories slow down. Slower production leads to fewer jobs. Fewer jobs lead to lower incomes. Lower incomes lead to even less spending. And the cycle repeats, over and over, like a quiet echo moving through the entire economy. This is the domino effect of a weakening middle class. One postponed purchase becomes 1,000. One closed shop becomes a street of empty stores. One family struggling becomes a generation losing its footing. And the most dangerous part? None of this looks like a crisis at first. It looks like a father skipping dinner to save money. It looks like a small business reducing hours. It looks like a teenager giving up hobbies because they're too expensive now. But underneath these tiny sacrifices, an entire country is slowly running out of momentum. Collapse is not a sudden event. It is a long, heavy breath, held by millions of people who no longer believe that tomorrow will reward their efforts. When a nation finally breaks, the world sees only the dramatic moment, the protests, the bank closures, the headlines declaring a crisis. But those are just the final chapters. The real collapse, the one that matters, the one that changes people, always begins in silence. It begins the moment a family stops planning for the future because they're too busy surviving the present. It begins the moment a parent hides their worry behind a smile so their children won't feel it. It begins the moment the middle class, and the heartbeat of every stable society, starts to fade away. Countries don't fall when governments fail. They fall when ordinary people lose the belief that tomorrow will reward their effort. And once that belief disappears, no amount of speeches or promises can bring it back. If this story made you think, if it reminded you of something you've seen in your own life, join me. Because every economy has a pattern, every crisis has a beginning, and every nation, no matter how strong it believes it is, has warnings written quietly inside its homes. My name is The Financial Story, and I tell the stories money tries to hide.